I've found that how material is presented to us can make a huge difference in our ability to learn it. When I was first told about hand drill, I was told that it was nearly impossible. I think the person said that there were 4 or 5 people in the United States who had the ability to make a fire with a hand drill, which I now know to be less than true. But I went into the practice of trying to do hand drill feeling like it's basically the equivalent of becoming an Olympic athlete, and I couldn't get it. I think I was completely psyched out, and I just tried harder and harder, felt like I had to build up muscle strength and endurance, and it just wasn't happening. Then came along Mark Olson, a great friend of mine, an amazing bushcrafter, and he said, "No, Kenton, it's easy." And he showed me some proper technique. He showed me how to build a kit, and it really is not that difficult. So what I'd like to have here is a video that walks you through right from the beginning. I'll show you what materials to gather, how to identify the materials, and how to prepare them, how to condition your hands, and how to start a fire using the hand drill. If you watch this and you practice, I think in 2 weeks you will have your first hand drill fire. So I hope you enjoy this, and let's get started. So what do we use out here to make a hand drill? I've been experimenting, and I like to try as many different materials as I can. I'm going to share 2 combinations that I think work really, really well. And one I'm just going to tell you about. The other I will ID for you, and we'll go through exactly how to find it. The first one surprised me. It's white pine and Jerusalem artichoke stems. And the white pine, I've used branches off of the white pine. There seems to be a hardness difference in the wood. If it's recently dead, it's still really, really hard. And the Jerusalem artichoke, which is a fairly weak stem, is going to shatter and just won't work with this. But if you find one that has spent a little bit of time out in the woods, it's weakened a little bit, has that sort of gray sheen that they sometimes get, you may know what I'm talking about, then that's going to be ideal. And the Jerusalem artichoke stalks I find are best to gather right now. It's spring in Wisconsin. In that early spring, they haven't had a chance to rot or to deteriorate too much from UV light, but they're a really great stalk. They have a nice pith inside. Some you'll find you'll press on them and they just sort of break apart. Others will have a nice strong resilience, and that's the Jerusalem artichoke stalk that you're looking for. Take one of those, combine it with the white pine with the same technique that I'll be showing you for our other combination, and you should be good. Today though, I would like to cover box elder and mullein. Box elder is a very, very common tree. Can't guarantee you have it in your area or your country, but around here it's very common and it's fairly widespread. Also, mullein is a wide-ranging plant that a lot of us are familiar with and makes a just unsurpassed drill for the hand drill. Here's how to identify box elder. This is in the maple family. A lot of people consider it sort of a weed tree. I love them because they grow in fun climbing shapes and their wood is good for hand drill. So I'm going to show you up close the buds and the seed structure and a little bit more. You should be able to identify it then. Being in the maple family, it's opposite branched. Means these go right out opposite of each other, as opposed to one coming out here and, for instance, the other one branching off where my finger would be. That makes sense. So on an opposite tree you may see some alternate branching, but you're going to see a lot of these opposites. If you like bud identification, there's the spring bud. The bark is very distinctive. And you'll probably see a fair amount of dead branches. These tend to branches break on them very easily. And so you'll see dead branches that are all over the place. At least in Wisconsin here, we often get this sort of sulfur yellow lichen that grows on them as well, which is another way to identify them. Incidentally, these are the perfect place to find elm oysters. Not actually an oyster mushroom, but looks very much like an oyster mushroom. I'll try to cover those this autumn. A delicious mushroom that grows very abundantly. And there's some of the seeds. Just look like maple seeds, those little helicopters. So when it breaks, it often comes off in chunks. You can see we almost have a fireboard there. Here's one more identifying characteristic. See that red coloration? You'll often find that when you cut open this wood. It'll fade fairly quickly once it oxidizes, but it's a pretty bright color. And there we have a fireboard. Hearthboard. Lots of different names for it. The important thing is that we're finding a piece of wood that we can make flat or has already come flat on two sides and has a nice flat surface here. This is mullein, which you are probably familiar with if it grows in your area. It's very distinctive. This is the second year stalk, and we're looking for one that is nice and dry like this and is going to offer a long, straight, I would say it's nice to start with about 18 inches of length. And we don't want it to be too thin. This would be a little bit thinner than I would want to work with. But if we come down further here, we don't want it to be too thick either. This isn't too bad of a thickness. So this is one we could probably use. Here's another example of a dried stalk. This one has a lot of the leaves still on it. That would be just fine to use. Right in here, we can see underneath the leaves is a very nice straight spindle. This is a first year plant. Really fuzzy leaves. Very distinctive little rosette. And this one is little. They get really big. So you can imagine that this leaf could extend way out when it's full grown. This one just stayed small. So find that straight piece of mullein, select out about 18 inches or so. Then using the flat of your blade, I'm using the blade, I'm using it straight up and down, and just scraping all those extra leaves off of there. Then I can tilt my blade and I'm just getting all those little bits off. Especially when we're starting out here, we need to condition our hands. We don't want to get blisters. If you get a blister, it's going to set us way back. So we want to knock everything off of there and make a really smooth spindle. So now I have a raw spindle and a raw hearthboard. Next is the hand conditioning. Again, this is meant for those of you who have never done this before, and I would devote at least 2 weeks to conditioning your hands to this. After that, you'll be able to make multiple fires a day. But to start out slow. If you get a blister or you start bruising things up, then it's going to set you back weeks. If you're patient for this 2 weeks, and I'll explain what to do during those 2 weeks, you'll be great. The hearthboard we've selected, we don't want it to be too thick. We're trying to generate a lot of heat, and anywhere that heat can dissipate, in other words, if we have a great big log and that heat can dissipate out into the rest of the log, it's going to make it more difficult on ourselves. So we build up skill. We can take a lot of the tips that I'm going to be giving you, toss them to the wind, because you'll be able to use your innate skill that you've learned in order to make up for deficiencies in your materials or in your environment. But for now, we're going to try to do this in optimal conditions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to make a small impression or hole for the spindle to fit into. All I'm doing is using the tip of the knife to dig in. I usually do it at 4 points. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. And then connect the dots a little bit. To begin with, you can make a larger hole. Now, I don't mean bigger or round, but a little bit deeper. I'm trying to get that hole to correspond with the diameter of my spindle. You can see this has a real sharp cut on it. So I'm going to cut in little slice as I work around. That's going to give me a more or less rounded end. If I see a place where there's a little bit too much of the woody part, the mullein has a woody exterior and then a soft pith inside. I can take down a little bit of that until I have a decently flat surface there. This doesn't have to be perfect, because when we put it in here and we start turning it around, it's going to wear itself into the proper shape. Actually, both of these are going to wear themselves into the proper shape. So we just need a hole to start it. One thing about a mullein spindle is that after you've smoothed it out so nicely so that it's going to be good to your hands, it also becomes very slippery. So when you're using it as a hand drill spindle, your hands are going to slip on it. It's going to be pretty frustrating. There's a great workaround here that will make all the difference. Let's go over into the pine woods. Here it is, pine pitch. Really anything will work. This is off of a white pine, and I find that that's very sticky and doesn't stick to your hands too much. A lot of people say, put this pitch on your hands. What I do instead that works a lot better for me, and again, doesn't leave my hands all full of pitch, is to take some and rub it over the surface of your spindle. This is almost cheating. It makes it so easy to grip the spindle. Make sure when you're done that it feels tacky all around, and then bring some of this pitch back with you, because every time you make a fire with this, you're going to find that most of that pitch is gone. It's starting to get slippery again, and you'll want to replenish it. So bring some home. Okay, you're going to want a surface. You can use a piece of cloth, bark, whatever you want to use. You want to keep this hearthboard dry, because damp is really gonna mess with you. So always trying to keep that as dry as possible. I'm setting this down. I'm gonna hold it down with my foot and make sure that I'm in a comfortable position. Then I'm gonna set the tip of my spindle in there. I am using the thicker end. The theory being that as I press down, you can imagine I'm pressing down on if we would extend that angle out, it's easier to press down on something like this than to press down on something like this. So it probably gives us a little bit of advantage to have it so that this is the thick end flaring out, my thin end on top. What I'm trying to do now is to burn a hole, and not necessarily to burn a hole at this point, but just to make the impression of a hole, and also to get the end of my spindle to be nice and smooth and rounded. Most importantly, I'm conditioning my hands. So the idea is simply moving it back and forth. And right away, trying to practice long strokes. It's really easy to want to go like this. And get in the habit right from the beginning of making nice long strokes with it. So I'm just trying to get the feel right at the beginning here of getting that to spin and trying to make an impression right there in the hearthboard. Every time I catch myself doing small ones, switching back to nice long strokes. If they start to go down towards the bottom, I can just move back up and build up my speed a little bit. Now we have a nice impression. We have a nice smooth spindle that's going to stick in there. And you're ready for step 2, which is to begin practicing your floating technique. This was always really confusing to me. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. One way is to think of your fingers pointing up towards the sky with each stroke. So I come from a martial arts background, and often what we're trying to do is to burn neural pathways. So we're just allowing our body to feel this out and to get the hang of it. It can seem frustrating at first, like, how does this work? But it'll come. Just sit here, start low, and see if you can walk your way up the spindle. You have to deliver downward pressure at the same time that your fingers walk up it. Every time you get up to the top, start low again and start walking your way up. Once you have the feeling of that float, you can just sit there and practice it. When you're doing something else, watching YouTube videos for instance, just sit there and practice your float. Nice long strokes, and just keep it spinning. This is a very, very important part of your technique, and so the practice will pay off. Before long though, you're going to be tempted to want to get some smoke, and this is okay because it's also going to help your hands to condition. So to do that, you can speed up a little bit, keep those nice long strokes, and press down. You probably won't be able to see smoke today because it's a little bit windy and it's sunny. But there it was, and you can see the burn that's created in the hearthboard. And so once you get that, you want to probably stop and check and see how your hands are feeling. if they're starting to feel a little bit hot, take a break. Again, if you injure them now or bruise them, it's going to set you way back. So even though you're excited about it that first day, take your time. A little bit more. Realizing and starting to feel out here that I can sort of rub it along the top, along these bones, and that is going to hurt after a while. Then I can switch and rub it along the pad of my hand here and along these bones until that is starting to feel like it's getting a little hot, or not bruised, but just a little bit painful. So really two surfaces of the hand. There's the top one, there's the bottom one. Remember, I'm kind of keeping my fingers flared out. Later on, you can let them come together if you want. But right now, just to help with technique, it helps to have them flared out a little bit. So over the course of 2 weeks, you're going to build up a little bit of callousing here, and you're also going to build up some strength so that you're not getting any internal bruising. And that's the most important part of this, because at first, your hands are probably going to hurt. Take your time with this. Again, give yourself 2 weeks of practicing that floating method, and then practicing giving a little bit of strength to it and seeing if you can get a touch of smoke. You don't need to drill a hole through the board or anything right now. In fact, as soon as you get smoke, it's probably a good time to stop. Then Mark showed me something really cool with the notch. And essentially we're creating a space underneath the hole. This allows a lot more airflow. It allows the ashes or the dust to fall straight down, and that spindle is going to be just driving and sort of touching the top of that small pile of dust that you've created. I'll try to show you. That'll explain better. To do this, I'm going to cut out an outline. This would be my typical notch that I want to come in to just in front. In other words, probably to about there. I've actually had notches that came in halfway, you know, like way back into here, and were offset, and it's worked. So this is not super essential, but that's going to be your ideal. Coming almost to center, and you can see I've drawn a little arrow there. Then I'm going to draw a line that comes out a little bit, flaring. And down here, I'm going to draw another guideline. So thinking that this is going to be directly under here, I'm probably actually going to make this wider. And then I'm just going to carve down on one side, carve down on the other side, take out my chunk. One thing to remember with notches is that once you get a basic notch carved, it's going to be really easy to come back to a side and to carve that side deeper. So at the beginning, just get yourself a notch that at least conforms basically to the shape that you want it to be. So as this notch comes together, you're probably seeing that it's different than the typical notch, which just would be cut out right here and right here, and would go straight down. This one actually curves down underneath. Once I'm here, I can see I've got a basic notch carved out. I need to go a little bit deeper. Easy to do. And there we go. Making a nice deep groove under here where that dust can fall. A little bit deeper. Good, we're ready to go. The biggest problem you'll have with making a notch is if you take too much out of an area here. For instance, if I was going to cut in deeply here, and then when your spindle's rolling in there, it's going to slip out. So that's the only reason to keep that notch not too wide at the entrance. When you feel you're ready for your first fire, assemble your materials. Here's some of that pine pitch. Make sure you coat your spindle, get it nice and sticky. The first time you get a coal, you are really going to want to start a fire with it, because that's going to be an amazing feeling. Just storage there. So it's a good idea to have some coal extenders ready. This is a piece of punkwood that's been charred. Thank you, Grerwolf. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, for teaching me about that. Here's a piece of chaga fungus. Hoof fungus is another great coal extender. And you can set those aside. Have a tinder bundle ready. This is just grass, and then it's the dried tops of goldenrod. Some really good light material. If it's too loosely packed, it's easy to lose your coal in there and it sort of falls apart. So make sure that you either give a twist or you pack it fairly densely and have a nice little bird's nest where your coal can go right inside. Your notch can be facing towards you or away, it doesn't matter. I'm going to face it away from me so that you can see everything happening. So I'm going to insert this in and step on here, make sure everything's nice and secure. And here is really the most important thing that Mark taught me, and that is patience. Just relax into it, he told me, and this makes all the difference. I'm starting with floating. I'm going to rush things a little bit here since it's video and I don't want to make you sit too long. But really I might float for 2 or 3 minutes. This should be, by now, after you've conditioned your hands, very meditative and relaxing. You're just warming up that hearthboard and you're warming up that spindle. What we're trying to do is to build up some dust in this groove. And so, again, I'm going to rush it a little bit here, but we're going to go ahead, speed things up. If my hands come down the spindle, that's fine. Some people can float the entire process. I cannot. And we're trying to just build up some dust. Nice long strokes, and again, just staying really relaxed about it. This does not take a lot of effort. You'll get smoke pretty soon, and that's nothing to get overexcited about. Just part of the process. And really, again, build up your dust. You want that little notch to be almost filled with dust. Good breathing, relax, take your time. And as you build up dust, that's eventually going to become your coal. You can see that at some point you're going to have a good bit of dust, and then you can put a little bit more power onto it. And before long, you're going to notice, when you take a look down there, that even after you've stopped, that there's still some smoke going on. We didn't quite get it yet. And then when you pull it back, you'll see that the smoke's coming out and you have a coal. This is a great time to set your coal extender on there. Stay relaxed. Make sure you've got that going. This not only gives you an insurance policy, so that if for whatever reason this doesn't take, you have this as backup. You can set your tinder bundle like this, tip that upside down, and you've transferred it into the nest. Gently cup it. Remember, if you blow like this, you're going to suck a lot of air or smoke. And there you have fire. If that wouldn't have worked, I still have that as a coal extender. And I could have put that in. Pretty windy today. Chaga could have been lit off here and would have been a little bit longer burning. And chaga or the punk wood is going to start, you're going to have a lot more heat to work with. So even if your tinder bundle is a little bit damp, the chaga or the punk wood can make the difference in heat and drawing power to start something like that up. So there it is. Again, I have to thank Mark Olson for transforming my ideas about this, and that made all the difference. This is doable. Any of us can do it. It does not take a lot of strength. Does not take a lot of effort, just a little bit of time to condition your hands, and then being really relaxed when you're actually starting the fire. Take your time, let the board heat up, dry out, and be relaxed with it. You might be surprised at how little effort it takes. So please let me know your own experience with hand drill. Tips, tricks, who taught you the art. It's an amazing feeling to start a fire just with a hearth board and a spindle, and it's doable for any of us. So also feel free to write if you have any other questions. Thanks so much, and thanks for watching.